Our subject tonight is death and immortality. It's an article. I'm not actually going to be going through the article, but it's kind of based on an article by that name, Death and Immortality. You can find it on a website if you want to read it. It's www.theosophy, Theosophy, Trust, Trust, all one word, theosophytrust.org. And if you go there, you can find this article called Death and Immortality. Those of you who are interested in such things as we talk about here, if you don't read any other article or article on the topic that we've talked about so far, but you're willing to read one, this would be the one to read. It's astounding. It's also quite readable, unlike some of his articles, my teachers, which are quite abstract. This article, if you can read it. It's not abstract, and it's incredible. And if you do happen to go find it, you could even read it online, you know. If you do happen to go find it and you are going to start getting blown away by the perspective in it, you might want to bear in mind that it was a talk he gave at the age of 19 at Oxford University. So if you read it, this is a talk given by a 19-year-old at Oxford, yes. And it wasn't just a public talk, it was a talk to the brightest minds at Oxford, that this 19-year-old was giving this talk about death and immortality. And the actual talk he gave at Oxford, of which this thing you can go online, is a transcription. The original, when he gave the talk, the title of the talk was Death and Immortality in Tibetan Buddhism. But if you read the article, you'll discover it's not really about Tibetan Buddhism, but it's quite a bit about Buddhism, in that it has one of the more comprehensive views of the process called birth, living, death, and rebirth. And it's also the fact that one of the reasons he noted Tibetan Buddhism was because there are only two traditions that have a ancient and classical, in the sense they're written by wise beings, account of what happens between death and birth, and that's the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So the reason he mentions Tibetan Buddhism is because some of the ideas are contained in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And for you scholars, if you read that and then you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you'll say, my goodness, they're saying the same thing. Well, yeah, I mean, if you know what it is, you know what it is, whether you're in ancient Egypt or ancient Tibet or anywhere else. So yeah, they're similar. So that's the prologue. Death is something we all know about. And when I use the word us here in these talks, I'm not talking about us in the room. I'm talking about us humans. You know, so don't take it personally. You know, I'm just talking about us humans on the planet, subtracting out a handful of enlightened ones. The rest of us, I'm talking about us. You know, so we all know about death. Some of us know about it fairly directly because we've had people close to us die. Those of us who haven't had that experience yet may think that death is something that happens to other people. And it does. But it also happens to the person who's thinking it happens to other people, like on the news and stuff. And most of us are kind of afraid of it, if we think about it at all. We're not inclined to think about it. In the West, many of us consider thinking about it to be quote-unquote morbid. And if we do think about it, that is to say our own death, it and we actually like confront the fact that these bodies we're in are mortal, it can be a pretty scary thought. And it's scary enough so most of us don't want to examine it very closely. So instead we cling to some superstitious religion that tells us that all we have to do at the end is say a prayer or be blessed by the priest or something, everything will be hunky-dory, which is actually false. It's false. That's not how consciousness works. It's like someone telling you, all your problems today and your whole life will go away if you just go to this for a few moments. Well, you can go to that for a few moments, and they're all still there. Maybe you go to some service of some kind, and for an hour they're not there. But by the time you're halfway home in your car, there it all is again. So who wants to look at all that? So it's easier just to wallpaper it over and not think about it until one has to. And that's called old age, decrepitude. My goodness, what's going on here? So it's not a very, it's not a topic that gets a lot of play. Immortality, death and immortality, our topic. Immortality doesn't get a lot of play either, except in the sense that in the West, especially again, Western religions, immortality gets some time, but only from the standpoint if you do A, B, C, D, and E, even in the last 5 minutes of your life, then you'll go somewhere forever and be immortal, and be immortally there. It might be called heaven or whatever, different religions give it different names. Or if you're not a good, quote-unquote, good person, you'll also experience immortality, but it will be quite an unpleasant one. They draw pictures of it, and you're burning up, and this is horrible, So if we do have a conception of immortality, it's delusionary, because neither of the above is the case. There are after-death states, but they're not immortal. They're no more immortal than the state we're in right now, which is a mortal one. The after-death states have beginnings, middles, and ends, just like our life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there is nothing that doesn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Nothing, except nothing, has no beginning, middle, or end. But nothing's even scarier than death. Nothing. That's why we think a lot, because if we were to cease thinking for a moment, we'd encounter nothing. And so we keep thinking. So, Buddha and Krishna both said and taught that we, to their pupils, Buddha in a sutra and Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, speaking to his pupil named Arjuna, he said you have to meditate upon birth, death, sickness, decay, and error if you want to make any spiritual headway. You have to actually meditate upon, or you think deeply upon. You don't have to think of meditation in the stereotypical sense, but you have to really think about birth. What is it? Do you remember it? What is birth? Our scientists can't even tell us what happens in the first 7 months in the development of a human embryo. But were it to be understood, the whole rest of that life would be understood, it's said. So meditation upon birth, coming into being on this plane. the assumption of a physical form. One more time. We're talking to Buddhism here and Hinduism. And as this article says, were you to read it, it says that you may not like the idea that you've lived many times before and that you're going to live many future times. You may not like the idea, and that's quite fine, the article says. But nonetheless, 2/3 of the world believes in reincarnation. Doesn't make it right. But if you don't, statistically speaking, you're in the minority among the 6 billion of us currently on the planet. So meditation upon birth, which isn't like, it's not like thinking of physical birth. It's thinking of some being coming into a human form. A being who's been in human forms many times already and is carrying a lot of that with them, which accounts for what we bring in with us, you might say. But birth also signifies the coming into being of anything. So if you meditate on birth, it's not just human birth. Everything has a beginning. That's birth. You know, this talk had a beginning. You know, the day had a beginning. You know. Death. Meditate on death. Death of the body. Death has got to do with endings. Everything has an end. Everything has a death. You can go to the Gobi Desert, and on one of the edges of the Gobi Desert, there are these huge monuments sticking up out of the sand. Just huge, kind of like the Easter Island thing. And we have no idea who made them. None. Before recorded history, we know that much. Whoever made them is gone. Death ends. Everything ends. There's no permanence. Ventura one day won't exist. You know, the world as we know it one day won't exist. It'll have changed into some other kind of thing. So birth is a beginning. Death is an ending. And the thing to contemplate is that they both occur all the time everywhere. And those of you who are into things like physics might have read or have been told that from the standpoint of subatomic physics, the entire universe is coming into being and disappearing simultaneously in every instant. But we can't see it. That's exactly what they've taught in ancient Hinduism and Buddhism. Simultaneous creation and destruction going on every single second, but we can't see it. So birth and death are actually two sides of the same coin. There's no actual beginning from scratch, and there's no actual end and then it's over. So we're all involved in this process. Call it a stream. And it's a stream that's far greater than one would think if one identifies only with one's name and one's form. And this stream has no beginning as far as we know, unless you think there's some being who created it all, in which case you're once again incorrect. This universe was emanated out of the unknown. Emanate, like the sun emanates light, it doesn't create light. Light just streams forth. The beginnings just stream forth. And they carry with them something of what they're streaming forth from. And we're part of what's streamed forth. So we're carrying within ourselves that from which all this sprang forth, which is called in Buddhism the Buddha nature. No talking, or we'll have to ask you to leave, please. So that's called the Buddha nature in Buddhism. The thing that sprang forth and is within everything, because it's what comes out of it contains part of it. Like the rays of the sun are, in fact, part of the sun. And that's everywhere. And in human beings, it's called the Buddha nature, which we all are said to have. To put it more dramatically, we're all Buddhas. We all have the nature within us of ultimate reality, but we don't know it. So the task isn't to become immortal. We already are. The task is to realize that we are. And that's called the path to enlightenment, or the path to the kingdom of God within you. When Jesus says the kingdom of God is within you, he's talking about what in Buddhism they call the Buddha nature. One thing a person has to get over is attachment to some particular formulation. It doesn't matter what you call it. Call it the Buddha nature, call it the kingdom of heaven within you, call it the one, you call it whatever you want to. It's not a matter of calling it anything, it's a matter of realizing it. Which is why he says in the article, studying the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't going to get you there. Although you may be regarded as some kind of scholar, but you still don't know anything about dying or after death states, because the only way you can know about them is through direct experience. So someone asked me before the talk, well, how do you practice dying? Because Socrates, one of his most famous statements, oft quoted, is the true philosopher practices dying. Because if you don't practice it now, you won't be able to suddenly practice it as you're dying. So you can only understand death during life. Because if you don't understand it before your body dies, you certainly won't understand it as it's dying. They teach. So the true philosopher practices dying. What does that mean? Is walking around morbidly thinking about death all the time? No, that's not practicing dying, that's being morbid. That's easier than practicing dying. Practicing dying means you're dying every moment. To put it crudely, you're letting go at every moment. Just letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. Why? Because there's no beginning and no ending. So why hang on? So you just let it go, and the more you let it go, the more you learn about death, which is none other than life. To understand one is to understand the other, but you can't understand it unless you're in a body alive. You're not going to get a big flash at the end unless or what you're going to get at the end is in direct proportion to what you did before you got there. It's kind of like, as a woman named Blavatsky said, who I've mentioned from time to time, she said in one of her easier books that she wrote for anyone who could read it, she said, I tell you again, sleep is death. Sleep is death. So when you go to sleep at night, you wake up, I mean, rarities aside, you wake up as the same person who went to sleep. So, you're not going to wake up, you've set a whole chain of causes and emotions since birth. All your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, your feelings, your likes, your dislikes, your diversions, all that. We've all got all that stuff going on. Going to sleep isn't going to make it all go away, because it's there when we wake up again. So too with death. Whatever we take to it is what we carry through it, because it's a continuum within which there are beginnings and middles and ends, and every end is a new beginning. And if you can bring that into the so-called moment, about which some people are making a great deal of money, talking about the now, which is like, duh. You know. But in order to avoid the incessant coming into being, lasting, and going out of being, on whatever plane, a person has to be fully present. And the only way to be fully present is to be fully absent. It's the only way. You have to die to be here. Otherwise, you're not really here, but you think you are. And you have a name, and you got a life, something you call your life history. You carry around in your head. At least the parts of it you can do. They don't freak you out. You carry around in your head. The rest of it's in the quotes subconscious. And the really parts we don't want to look at are in the quote unquote unconscious. Because why are they there? Because I'm not about to go there. So whatever we're carrying around with us, that's who we think we are. And the key word there is think. We are. We think we're somebody. So the body's not the problem. It's what we think about it. And most of us think we're it. Or it's us. And maybe you don't think you're your body, but when your body contracts a terminal disease, or when your body starts into decrepitude and old age, you'll realize that you think you're your body. Why? Because you'll be thinking to yourself, I'm dying. Whereas in fact, the body's dying. But most of us think we're dying. Oh man, I'm getting old, I'm going to die soon. No, you're not. But your body sure is. See the problem? Immortality we don't know about because we think we're our bodies. And they're not immortal. So immortality is just a myth, or it's something we're going to get at the last minute by saying the right prayer, stringing through the right set of beads, bowing to the right image, pleading at the very last moment. No. That's like pleading with the piano teacher to be a good pianist. It's absurd. The piano teacher says you want to be a good pianist, you go practice the piano. You don't plead and then somehow your wish is granted and you're the world's greatest pianist now. So pleading doesn't work in anything we know about. Those of you who have gotten good at anything, you didn't get good at it by pleading with somebody to make you good at it. You just had to go out and practice it. So it's no different with after death states and dying. There's no pleading. So those of you who think there's someone or something to plead to, you're wrong. There's no one to plead to. Which is why this article says that if you get far enough along, you realize that even the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the Christs and the Krishnas and the Ramas, they're just names. All there is universal consciousness, and it doesn't come in little packages called Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, Muhammad. Those are illusions that these beings take on in order to help us. But they don't think they're bodies. They don't think they're their bodies. But they know we think we are our bodies, so they have to pretend. And they also know that we think we know who we are based upon our bodies and the life experience of that body and the name. So they know we think we are somebody because we have a body. So they have to pretend that we are somebody when they speak with us. But they know we're nobody. Because all there is consciousness. Universal, omnipresent, eternal. Which goes through these manifestations of bodies, physical For those of you who want to get a little deeper, you could talk about something called the feeling body. When you're having feelings, you're often not particularly aware of yourself physically, but there's a whole body there. Then there's what you might call the mind body. You're all familiar with that one. It's the one that chases you around all day, every day. It tells you what you should or shouldn't be doing, whether you're good or bad, whether you deserve praise or not. The person in your head talks to you all day, every day, and half the night, usually. It's called dreams. So, from the highest standpoint, according to this article, which would be the standpoint of a fully enlightened being who's not a being, because all there is being, capital B. That's why if you get far enough along, according to this article, even the Buddhas disappear. There's just pure light. Bottom line. And it's compassionate light. And it's joyous light. It's called bliss. And if you get that far, and you can sustain it, then you have a choice when their body dies, whether to just stay in that light, which means you're going to disappear just into the light. There'd be no more you, just light. Or whether through compassion you decide to maintain some kind of vesture on a very subtle, invisible plane. You decide to maintain a vesture out of pure compassion to keep appearing to have a body in the world so that you can help mankind suffering. And that's what all the great teachers represent. They manifested a form consciously. Imagine it. Think about it. If you can imagine and think about it, then you're imagining and thinking about something that we all have the potential of, because we all have the Buddha nature, which is what they're manifesting. But a sage, not necessarily one of the great teachers, some of them are great teachers, some of them are unknowns, but to a few perhaps. But it's said, for example, of Ramana Maharshi, who was a normal little boy until the age of 9 when he when he told his father, I'm going to go to sleep now, and I want you to guard my body and just be around this body until I wake up again. And he was just quote unquote asleep for quite a number of days. When he woke up, he was fully enlightened, and there was no one there anymore. There is no one there. Just pure being, pure consciousness. But those of us who couldn't see that thought there was someone there. There's a body there, and it's named Ramana Maharshi. So we think there's someone there. And there's no one there. Just being, and compassion, and bliss, and complete sacrifice, in the sense of being willing to live among us who think there's someone there. And the reason we think there's someone there is because we think there's someone here. So what you see is what you get. And what you think is what you get. This is why some people's reality is other people's illusions. What's totally real to you might be a complete illusion from someone else's standpoint, and vice versa. Because it's all just transitory. So the thing to be explained to this article isn't death, it's life. Death is a given, but what's this life thing about? From the highest standpoint, There's a woman named, we've talked about her actually. There's a woman no longer in a body, so allegedly she's dead. Her body died. You know, if we're not these bodies, think about it. When they die, we still are. So if you like the Buddha, or you like Jesus, or you like Muhammad, or you like one of these great teachers, they're not dead. If you're thinking of them in terms of a historical time, you're not getting it in a big way. They're as alive as they ever were, because they were never not alive. They were never born, in the sense of identifying with it. And they never died. So you think, you know, you're devoted to one of these beings, they're as present now as they ever were. That's the benefits of getting beyond the physical plane and thinking you're a body. It's all happening all the time. But anyway, this woman named Anandamaya Ma, when she was a young girl, she told her parents, she always was. She's a little girl. She said, you know, I always was. And she lived a long life. She got married and had a couple kids. And toward the end of her life, she says, all through all of this apparent life I've lived, nothing's really happened. That's her one-liner. Nothing's happened. But something certainly appears to have happened, called birth, maturation, death. And bodies do come into being and last a while and disappear. But from the standpoint of enlightenment, nothing's happened. Except a movie. It's a divine movie. The emanation, it's the unknown source is within all of its so-called aspects, which is why enlightenment can be found from any state of consciousness. Teach the Buddhas. It can be found in a hell state and it can be found in a heavenly state. Because the thing you're looking for is in all the states. Just like you artists, if there are a couple artists here. You know about your colors, you know, you got your primary colors, but then you got all these sub things. Same in music. You know, you got the scale, but then you got all these other tones and stuff. Well, that's all going on, but the mystery is that none of it has anything to do with who we are. None of it. Why? Because we aren't anybody. Well, hell, I'm not. I am somebody. I'm a pillar of my community. Good for you. Good luck at the moment of death when you discover you just have no idea what's happening to you and you're afraid. So having been a pillar of a community hasn't done the trick for you. Or you could be the person who you could be on the other side of the coin. Instead of being something, pillar community, whatever the hell you think you are, some people carry around a negative identity. They're not something. I'm not one of those. And that's who they are. I'm not one of those. You know, I hate those people. I'm glad I'm not one of them. And as the article points out, desire and aversion are both methods of attachment to this process. You can be attached to somebody in the negative sense of attachment. You can be attached to someone through desire, or like, or love, or whatever you want to call it. And you can be equal attached to someone through hatred, fear, equal. So the people who say, I'm not attached to anything. They're the ones who are attached to things. The people who tell you what they really don't like, that's what they're doing. The people who are raving on about morality are the immoral people. This article says this. We're finding that out in the pedophile problem of the Catholic Church. The ones who preach one thing, who preach against something, are the very ones doing it. So whenever you come across someone who really doesn't like something, they're telling you who they are. It's got nothing to do with what they don't like. They're telling you about them. God, I hate homosexuals. Oh, really? How interesting. Yeah. That's called depth psychology. Yeah. So if a person thinks about error, birth, death, and then you're supposed to think about error, E-R-R-O-R. You're supposed to meditate on error. I'm sure none of us in this room have ever made an error, but there are people who have made errors. They look back and say, boy, that was a mistake. That's error. So you meditate on error, but you don't personalize these meditations. Right? If you're meditating on birth, don't think of your birth. You're meditating on birth, beginnings, universal. Don't personalize it. That's just an ego trip. It's a universal thing, beginnings, birth. Death, same thing. Don't personalize it. It's not about you. Same with error. Don't personalize it. Oh, I've made so many mistakes. My God, I don't know what to do. Someone must be able to get me out of this. That's where you get your deathbed conversions. Or no atheists in foxholes. It doesn't work. So error. Don't think of your errors. That's just self-obsession. Oh my God, I'll never get out of this hole I've dug. Why are you thinking about yourself? Humanity is full of errors. It's called the suffering of humanity. If we weren't making errors 24/7, we'd live in a peaceful world. Not a hate-filled one, envy-filled one, jealousy-filled one, sex fantasy-filled one. If we weren't making errors, we wouldn't be living in this kind of world. So meditating on errors is a pretty big meditation. Basically, you meditate on the human condition as it is at present. It's basically errors. So meditate on errors, think about errors. But don't be getting judgmental just because you're not thinking about your own. Don't be thinking of someone else's errors. No, humanity. Not your neighbor's errors. Oh boy, they sure blew it. I don't think I'll tell them. I don't think they can handle it. Like you know. What do you actually know? What a sage said, all perception is relative. All perception is relative, whether it's during life or after death. What's it relative to? Your particular stream. Your likes, your dislikes, your pluses, your minuses, all your experiences, all that together, every aspect of you kind of coalesces and looks out through your eyes. And that's what you see. What you see may not be what the person next to you sees, because their set of variables is slightly different. You might call it by the same name. That's a different thing. So what do we see? We see ourselves projected onto the screen. And to grasp that idea is to begin the spiritual journey. I only see a projection from my own mind. Why? Because there's nothing to see. The ultimate nature of reality is a light-filled void. It's called shunyata in Buddhism. Emptiness, nirvana, kingdom of heaven. There's nothing there except light. There's no you there. So if someone comes up and tells you they're enlightened, just give them some compassion from your heart and walk away. Because if someone thinks they're enlightened, by definition, they're not. Because in enlightenment, there is no one there. That's what it is. It's getting rid of the person who thinks they exist. And that's what we do. We think we exist. Why? Because we got a body, which we think has something to do with who we are. And if you start thinking maybe it doesn't have that much to do with who I am, you won't get too far, because everyone you run into thinks it's who you are. That's how they did it. That's how they quote unquote recognize you. Oh, here comes George. Oh, really? That's not what a sage sees coming toward him. George. Sage, if you were to meet a sage, and some of us may have met a sage and not know it, that's one of the mysteries of human existence. Sages don't walk around with a tattoo across their forehead that says sage, and they don't come in any particular manifestation, dress code. You know, all that's Maya. So you might run into a sage and not know it, but whether you do or not, the bottom of what I'm trying to say here is that a sage, when they perceive what you call you, they don't even see your body. They don't give a damn what your name is. What they see is an eternal being, and a whole bunch of lives back there, and they see exactly the states of consciousness that being's involved with. And they try to help them move along to bigger ones. Because enlightenment, according to this article, is not a destination. It's a state that we're all in all the time. And back to that again. But we don't know it. It's like a fish in the ocean looking for water. It's like, hey, you're already in it, fish. So we're all like swimming around through a universal ocean of being, and we're looking for being. It's insane. There's nothing to look for except what already is. Part of which is this. This isn't like not part of it, and the real part's somewhere else. You know, when I get enlightened, this will all be different. No, it won't. But you'll be looking at it differently. There's an old Zen Buddhist saying, a lot of you have heard it, but it's a very famous, much respected Zen Buddhist priest centuries ago. And he said once, and you've probably heard this, some of you, he said, before I began my search for enlightenment, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. And during the many, many long years of my search for enlightenment, mountains were no longer mountains and rivers were no longer rivers. And when I became enlightened, mountains are once again mountains and rivers are once again rivers. So it's the in-between part, when nothing's what it seems. They tell you it's a mountain. No, it's not. It's a bunch of subatomic particles. Oh, okay. Sorry. I could have sworn it was a mountain. No, you're wrong. Just a bunch of particles moving at the speed of light. Get over it. Okay. Then someone says there are no beings. You know, you don't even exist in the sense in which we don't even exist in the sense in which we think we do. And so then, if you pursue that, other than just idly, then you're going to go through a period where you don't know who you are. So then you get to Ramana Maharshi's suggestion. Just keep asking, who am I, to yourself in your mind. And the answer isn't me. Who am I? Me. Who's me? Well, look in the mirror, that's me. No, it isn't, that's an image. Backwards. So you can't see yourself in a mirror, and if you think you can, then you got a problem. You can see your body in a mirror. You know, a lot of people like mirrors. My brother-in-law, when his daughter was about 12, she was a child prodigy, but when she was 12, she was 12. So she started spending a lot of time looking at herself in the mirror, making little adjustments. A little more rouge here maybe, a little more, get this eyebrow. You know, so one day I'm over there and she's doing this trip. She's discovered her body, you know, she's going into becoming a teenager, you know. So she's looking over there at the mirror, and I suddenly hear my brother-in-law say to her, "That's enough mirror time, Vanessa." She doesn't look in mirrors much anymore. So meditating upon air is recommended. This all got to do with preparing for death. Then you have to meditate on sickness, not yours, sickness. 2/3 of the world is sick, right as we speak. There's a person in this room who told me about 2 weeks ago, who's, in a worldly sense, no great shakes, getting by. A person in this room who told me 2 weeks ago, if I died today, Barrett, I'd have to give thanks for the life I've had. Because 2/3 of the planet doesn't have food and doesn't have shelter right now as we're speaking. So we're the privileged few. So if you think you're lacking, you got a problem. So if you think about sickness, and that 2/3 of the world is, you're starting to appreciate the human condition as opposed to your own so-called personal condition. Sickness is universal. We all have been or will be. And if we have not been and will be, somebody in our family is going to get sick. Sickness is part of the deal, as Buddha taught and Krishna both. But you got to think about it. Not wallow in it, but think about it. What is it? And then decay. You got to think about decay. Things decay. You get a beautiful rose given to you. It's just beautiful. And it decays. Your house decays. So you call the termite people. My damn house is decaying. So they kill the termites and keep it alive for another 20 years. It'll disappear. My house is going to disappear. Oh yeah. Your dog is decaying. You know. Your mind is decaying. Everything decays. Why? Because there's nothing but change. There is nothing but change. There's no absolute beginning, and there's no absolute end. There's just flux, within which things appear to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And they do, in terms of appearances. If you're an intuitional Hindu, and not a ritualistic one, and the ritualistic ones dominate. And the ritualistic ones dominate in every world religion because they don't want to do the real thing, which is meditate on the things we're talking about. And decay is part of the deal. But if you're an intuitive Hindu, for example, They talk about Brahma. And if you're not intuitive, then you think it's some guy. He's the creator. Brahma has to do with beginnings. And then there's Vishnu. And Vishnu has to do with preservation. Everything has a beginning, everything has a middle. That's Vishnu. It's not a guy somewhere. Brahma's not a guy somewhere. But there are beginnings. That's a force in the universe called Brahma. In Hinduism, it's called other things in other religions. But then there's some force that keeps things in existence for some period of time, whether it's the life of a firefly or the life of a solar system. There's something that preserves that structure for some period of time, and that something is called Vishnu. It's a force in the universe that preserves for a while. Everything's for a while. So galaxies for a very long while. Astrophysicists can tell you how long the galaxy is going to last. It's a very long while. And biologists can tell you how long a firefly is going to last, and it's a very short while. But the lasting has to do with Vishnu. And then everything decays, and that's Shiva, called Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Shiva has to do with death/regeneration. Because when your body dies, for example, it's not like it just disappears. All of its component parts go back into the part of nature they came from originally. And you can look at that just purely in terms of chemistry. Your body's composed of certain elements. When it dies, those elements disintegrate and they go back to where they came from. Or they recombine into something else. So too on all the other planes of our being. So this Shiva thing is the dissolution/regeneration. There is no end. But this is a regeneration, a transformation into something else. Simply put, day turns into night. It's like nothing really ended in any final kind of way. It just, now it's nighttime. And it'll be dawn. And so you got Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva every day, just in the sunrise, sunset, night. But according to the article, if everything's coming into being all the time and going out of being all the time, every moment, every second, then Shiva's kind of the main guy. Ceaseless dissolution and ceaseless regeneration. Now, why are we talking about all this? Because if a person thought about all this, really thought about it, all by themselves alone. Not in a coffee shop, hanging out, talking about, well, let's talk about Shiva. Okay, cool. No, on your own, thinking about birth, death, sickness, decay, error, universally conceived, and then applying it to oneself. What's one doing? One's preparing to die before the fact. And if you're extremely arduous in your quote-unquote practice, because to think about these things in any serious way requires that you find a way to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. You can say, okay, I'm going to think about, pick one of them. I'm going to go think about this one. But you'll start thinking about it, before you know it, you're thinking about a cup of tea or something happened yesterday or something happened tomorrow. So to really think about these 5 elements requires some kind of tool that allows your mind to stay focused long enough so you can actually start to understand what's behind those words. Because those are just words: birth, death, sickness, error, decay. So to understand what those words are presenting requires something called concentration And most people need help to learn to concentrate because their minds can't stand still. So you need to practice. To do what? To practice dying. What's practicing dying? It's not visualizing your body dying. Practicing dying is realizing that this is all flux and letting go of your attachment to it. And you don't think you have attachment to it? Wrong. If you didn't have attachment to it, unless you're a being who is born on purpose and consciously, and if you were such a being, you'd know it. So most of you probably don't recall sacrificing your bliss in order to endure unenlightenment. So if we're here at all, it's because we're attached to personal existence in a name and a form. And that's why we're in one. And that's the Buddha's second noble truth. His first noble truth is there is suffering. His second noble truth is the cause of suffering is tanha, which is an unquenchable thirst for sensation, for physical sensation in a body. So if you want to practice dying, you have to practice getting over that grasping, wanting nature. That's a part of you, that's a part of us that keeps us from moving forward. Because we're attached to this stuff, either through desire or aversion, as we said earlier. So that's where they start talking about detachment. Detach. Well, then what am I supposed to do? Whatever you're supposed to do is what you're supposed to do. You got a job, go to work. You got children, raise them as well as you can. But don't be attached. Because there's really nothing to be attached to, and there's no you to be attached to it. But you can only realize that by becoming more detached. Well, how? Where do I begin? Begin by not knowing, in quotes, what someone else should be doing. You don't know what someone else should be doing. You don't have a clue. You know what you think they should be doing. Well, what the hell does that got to do with their process? Only a sage could answer that question, and sages don't tell people what to do. As Gandhi said almost at the end of his life, having spent his entire life trying to meditate upon death, trying to learn how to die before he got there. Because if you don't do it before, you won't be able to do it at the end. Your body will, but you won't. So as Gandhi said toward the end of his life, he said, what I've learned over all these years of trying to reform human society is that I can exhort people, but I've learned that I cannot expect. That's high level of detachment. I can plead with people, you know, love each other instead of hating each other. You know, but then I have to let go. That's detachment. You got a friend who's dying of alcohol or drug abuse. Go say the words you think you want to say, but you better let go because you're not in charge. So detachment is letting go of being in charge. If you want to be in charge of something, be in charge of your own life. Take responsibility for your own perceptions. You're not seeing reality, you're seeing your version of it. That's why we disagree on like who so-and-so is. We both meet so-and-so and we each have a different take. Well, that's not what I saw. So there's one famous sage who said, and he was actually wasn't famous, but he was contemporary. And he said he didn't speak. He just wrote, occasionally he writes something on a little like, this is some years ago, a little blackboard that someone gave him with chalk. So occasionally he'd write something on the board, but he hadn't spoken in decades. So one day he wrote on the board, "We see what we want to see. Eliminate the want, and you'll see as it is." What's the want? That's the tanha. That's the grasping. That's why we're here. Because we want this sensory experience. And once I think I'm a name and a form, which we all mostly do think we're a name and a form, or we wouldn't think we're going to die, just because our body does. Once I think I'm a name and a form, which I kind of can't help because I was raised, they told me who I was, and they kept pointing and tapping me on the chest and saying Barrett. So then I started tapping myself on the chest saying Barrett, So then that's it. You're stuck for life unless you start meditating on these 5 concepts. So once I'm consciously or otherwise, but in talks like this, we're trying to make ourselves more conscious of this stuff. So once I'm consciously or otherwise aware that I may not just be this body, I'll just go back a step. Once I think I am this body and this name, in these circumstances and these perceptions, what that does is it creates a matrix in which I see myself as separate from everybody else. Why? Different body, different person. So I'm caught up in what's called the illusion of separateness, which is the main illusion that has to be overcome if one seeks quote-unquote enlightenment. You have to get over the idea that you're separate from anything, from anybody. And that's just too horrifying for most people to contemplate. I mean, you can, okay, I'm not separate from anyone. You're not separate from Hitler? Well, maybe I'm separate from Hitler. You're not separate from anybody. So to move toward an awareness of non-separateness, that's where you get those Tibetan tankas with all those fierce-looking deities in them. Why? Because you're not separate from any of it. You're not separate from Auschwitz. You're not the good guy and the camp commander at Auschwitz was a bad guy. That guy, you're him. You're the guy torturing people in the Inquisition. You're also the beatific vision of some visionary. You're all of it. But it's not a you that's localized in space and time. You're not separate from anything. You're not separate from the trees in your yard. And there are people in this room to whom trees speak. I can't hear what they're saying, but there are a couple of people in this room that can hear what they're saying. And it's usually something worth hearing. I got some birds that hang around where I hang out all day. All day long, every day, rain or shine. By 6 in the morning, I'm sitting outside, and I'm out there until it's about 7 p.m. Outside. Writing, thinking, whatever. People come in, whatever. But I'm outside, so I've got these bird friends. No, bird friends. Especially one type of bird, because their song's so lovely. I've been on them for a couple of years. I like their song. Then I'm getting a haircut not too long ago from somebody who knows she's not her body and is full of joy all the time, brings joy to others, especially children, because they're easy to, they're already there. They haven't gotten corrupted yet by what we call growing up, and start thinking in terms of some teeny little category for yourself, like Venturian. I'm a Venturian. Feel sorry for those people in Oxnard, man. I'm going to Buena. Hate those damn people over Ventura High. It's pathetic. You didn't spend your first 3 years that way. You spent your first 3 years in what we call an enlightened state, your natural state. You came in that way. You've all been around little kids, 2, 3. I mean, look them in the eye, man. That what's looking out at you is not 2 or 3 years old. The body is. I had one of the most pleasant conversations I've had in years. I had several in the past month. But one of the most pleasant conversations I've had in years recently with a 14-year-old body, female, a 16-year-old body, male, and a 22-year-old body, female, and a 66-year-old body, male. And it was like one mind for 2 hours. I've never been so thrilled in a long time. Because it was real. There wasn't any identities happening, let alone bodies. You know, so at the end I cracked a joke. I said, well, so we all know it's got nothing to do with bodies. And everyone laughed. Because it's what looking out at you. And I found a very powerful passage in a transcription of a talk a man gave to a bunch of fellow recovering alcoholics in a book called A New Pair of Glasses, which is just some talks he gave in a retreat. It got transcribed and put into a book. I read the book because I was told to read the book, so I read the damn book. And I found it totally boring, except for one line, which is what I needed to hear when I read it, and it's stayed with me ever since. One line. And the line is, what you're looking for is what you're looking with. What you're looking for is what you're looking with. And what you're looking with is the perceiver, capital P, and there's only one of them. One being, having all these perceptions and all these myriad bodies. So as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, as one spirit, as one sun illumines the whole world, so too does one spirit illumine every body. Hence the dire heresy of separateness. There is no separateness. But if you think you're a body, then there's separateness. And as Gandhi said, he formulated it as a law. He called it a law. It's in the article talked about. The law is your willingness to kill is in inverse relation to your willingness to die. So the more unwilling you are to die, the more willing you are to kill. And as the article says, in your mentally, in your thoughts, in your feelings, or on the physical plane, it doesn't matter what level, you're killing. You're not killing someone just because you don't go up to them with a gun and shoot them. You're killing someone by thinking negative thoughts about them. And you think, well, I'm not hurting them, I'm not doing anything. Yes, you are. You're having negative thoughts about them, and it's instantaneous communication. And they may wonder why they're having a bad day, because they can't put their finger on anything. And it's because you're sitting over there hating them. Why? Because we live in an interactive universe. The separateness is a complete damn illusion. And if you don't believe it, take Physics 1. You don't have to be spiritual to believe this. Take Physics 1. What do they tell you? It's all interacting with itself all the time. There are no barriers. There are no walls. So the upside is, if you're thinking positive thoughts about someone, you might actually help them. There are people in this room who actually have very spiritual practices that involve sending out compassion to particular people even who might be benefited by it. What do you think the Buddhas are doing who are not in a body? Or the Christs or the Mohammeds, the ones who didn't die but we think they died because a body died. It's ridiculous. What are they doing? They're sending out this vibration eternally. As this article says, and it's one of the most profound things I've ever read, it says these fully enlightened beings, who in fact are not separate at all from anything, and so it's a maya to think of them as individual beings, because they aren't. But these beings, it's because of their ideation, it says in this article, that the force, the word he uses force, that the force of the Buddha nature is maintained in the world. It's because of their ideation that we even have a shot, because they're maintaining that force in the world. And when they come and teach us, they direct our attention to it. They direct our attention to the part of ourselves that can resolve to reawaken to our true nature, which is the same as everybody else's true nature, which is why children enjoy playing, because it's fun. So for a sage, life is fun, but it doesn't mean they're going to be looking like it. They can be very stern and strict, but life's fun. It's a dance. People say, oh, it's all an illusion. No, it isn't. Or as my teacher told me once, because I was about 30 at the time, and he saw me, I was with him, and he saw me seeing the illusory quality of all this. He picked up on it, and he says to somebody else who was with us, not to me, Barrett knows this is all an illusion. He sees it. But what he needs to learn is that it's a divine illusion. Why? Because what's manifested is one with what's manifesting. So we're all parts of the divine. We're all fragments of the divine. And if we move far enough into ourselves, we'll realize we're not even fragments. There's just the divine. That's all there is. So the Dalai Lama, knowing that we're not going to get it, for the most part, he just keeps repeating, loving kindness, loving kindness. Just try to practice loving kindness. Try to be kind to people. Because he knows most people aren't going to seriously consider birth, death, sickness, decay, and error. It's too damn scary. So loving kindness. He even said not too long ago. I mean, this is like the main guy in a lot of aspects of Buddhism. As a quote position, which he says he'd rather not have, but it's his duty. But he said not very long ago, just to a group of people, got onto the internet. He said, "I'm not a Buddhist. My religion is loving kindness. Buddhist is just a category. Christian is just a category. All these people are, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim." And then they get to fight with each other, oh, which one's the real one? Is Buddhism the real one, or Hinduism, or Christianity? None of the above. That's like calling the sun, some name for the light of the sun, and your name's better than someone else's name for the light of the sun. It's insane. It's got nothing to do with concepts. There was a man who said, in India, you can come across, there are people who worship Brahma, people worship Vishnu, people worship Shiva. This is the ritual where it's all become ritualized. It's kind of like worshiping Jesus, or Virgin Mary, And this man said, and if Shiva's your guy, and you say you're in India, and Shiva's your guy, and this man whose guy was Shiva, That's the one he could relate to best. Not a being, but the ceaseless dissolution and recreation. So his deal was Shiva. But if you're in India and you worship Shiva and you're a ritualist, then they call you a Shaivite. It's like if you're worshiping Jesus, they call you a Christian, you know. So this guy says, my guy is Shiva, but I'm not a Shaivite. Because that's a box. So the whole deal is like expanding the box. No matter what your box is, you meditate on these 5 things, it'll start expanding. But it's painful. Growth is painful. That's why most of us would rather not grow. It's easier. Just kick back, you know, have a couple hits, a couple beers, you know, what the hell. That's easy. It's hard to think about birth, sickness, error, decay, and death. It's hard to prepare for death. But as one Sufi mystic said, if you don't die before your body does, you're not going to die after. You're going to go into the after-death states, which are described in every world religion, sometimes in the esoteric tradition only. But yeah, there are states between what we call death and what we call birth, just like there are states between what we call awake and what we call, or going to sleep and what we call waking up. There are states in between, dream states we call them. So it's no different with death. So what am I going to experience after I die, a person might ask. Whatever you're experiencing now. And furthermore, they teach, if we haven't prepared ourselves, furthermore, when you're dead, you won't know it. Because this will all be there, and whatever your life is what you're going to be involved with when you lose your body. And you're not going to know you're dead. Why? Because you didn't know you were alive. As the article says, we know about life, small l, and we know about death, small d, but we don't know about life, capital L, which includes birth and death. It's called the eternal life, which we all are in, but don't know it. So I have a friend. In other words, we're all immortals, as the Greek myths said. We're all immortals, you know, and some of us, and we all have our dance we're doing. And so most of us don't know we're immortals. That's why we're afraid of dying. And so I have a friend who believes we're all immortals. Not necessarily consciously immortal quite yet, but closer than a lot of people. And being consciously immortal isn't believing one's immortal. It's being consciously immortal. There's a book of collected questions and answers by Ramana Maharshi, and the name of the book is Conscious Immortality. So there are people who are consciously immortal. They usually don't announce it. But to move in that direction, one has to, between where we are right now, each one individual, wherever we are, whatever our process is at the moment, between where we are right now and conscious immortality lie all the meanies that you read about in fairy tales when you were a little kid. You know, like the guy under the bridge, you know, he's under there, you know, or the person guarding the castle, the dragon. You got to slay the dragon before you can get to rescue the maiden in distress. Why do kids like this stuff? Because it's real. It's all symbolic of human existence. Walt Disney was a mystic. And he created all these stories because he knew that we're immortal and that children can pick up on it. So he creates these things that have to do with reawakening soul memories. You got to slay the dragon, you're going to do this and that. So between where we are now and conscious immortality is a bunch of stuff that we don't want to look at. It's aspects of ourselves, but it's also aspects of all of it. So if you can depersonalize it, it's easier. Everything you don't like in you is in everybody else too. If they don't think it's in them, they haven't started yet. If you don't think you got Hitler inside you, you haven't made any progress. My teacher told me one day. And if you don't think you got a Buddha inside you, you haven't made any progress either. You got both. So get over the categories. Whatever you got in you, the guy sitting next to you has in them. Period. Why? Because it's all everywhere. There are no compartments. In a totally interactive universe, there are no compartments. So it's about getting over the compartments. But you don't suddenly get over. That's the myth. That's organized religion. Or you can get over the compartments by doing this. No, you can't. Getting over the compartments is a process that is very slow and painful. And you don't think it's painful? Learning is pain. You don't think learning is painful? Watch a young child learning how to walk. Fall down, but they get back up. Fall down, hit their head, get a big bump on their head. But it's the only way they're going to learn. You can't learn for them. But it's painful. They fall down, they cry. You can hold them, but there's nothing you can do. I mean, it's painful to learn how to walk. It's painful to meditate on death. It's painful to meditate on error. I'd rather be a Winchester's, for God's sake. Have a few ribs, you know. Maybe over at the Irish pub, I get some Irish green beer. You know, kick back with the guys, talk about immortality. So if you can start detaching, like I've had quite a few lives within this body, phases you could call them. One of which was would have been dead had it not been for X, who took me to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and thereby I'm alive. If this body is still alive. I learned a lot from some people who supposedly didn't know anything, because they didn't, like the one I learned the most from had a 6th grade education. And he was, when he got sober, they told him you have 6 months to live whether you stop drinking or not. The doctors. Your body's so shot, you can stop or not stop. You got 6 months. He died with 52 years of sobriety. He had 6th grade education. And he taught me a great deal. And he was joyful. But he was strict. So his joy was often hidden. So one day I'm really angry. I mean, I was very angry when I was trying to do myself in with alcohol and drugs. When I got the quote recovery, I was angry and negative and hated the whole goddamn thing. So I'm angry one day, and he says, and I'm telling him about it, venting as we call it. He looks at me and says, so with all your goddamn education, you don't know that anger is always a cover for fear? So next time you're angry, all you have to do is say, what am I afraid of? And you'll instantly know. But you have to ask the question next time you're angry. What am I afraid of? The anger goes away, and there it is. You want to make progress, you deal with it. You don't want to make progress, stay angry. Put it out there. You make me angry. God damn it. I was having a good day. The secret is no one can wreck your day but you. No one can wreck your day but you. That Catholic nun who went voluntarily into a German concentration camp to raise the spirits of the people in it. And the ones who survived wrote incredible letters about how this woman within the concentration camp and raising everybody's spirits just by her very being That's about as real as it gets. So the concentration camp didn't bring her down. It didn't bring Eric Fromm down. Who was that? Matt? No. Viktor Frankl. Thank you. It didn't bring Viktor Frankl down. He found freedom in the concentration camp. So no one can bring you down but you. That's a secret, though, because it's easy. It's nice to put it out there. I'd be having a good day if it wasn't for some person, the weather, the goddamn. When I was young, it was a goddamn commie conspiracy. Now it's the Iranian nuclear development. Oh, I was having a good day until I think about those guys that are going to bomb Israel, for God's sake. How can I be happy under those circumstances? You can be as happy as Abraham Lincoln said it. He was a one-liner guy, also a mystic, who had a voice, inner voice, like Socrates did. Abraham Lincoln said, very simply, he said, I figure people can be about as happy as they want to be. There it is. I had a student years ago, and she, at 14, she developed multiple sclerosis to such an extent that she was wheelchair bound. I was teaching at the time, and she took this class I was taking. She comes in her wheelchair. She took class, you know. She's not disabled in the sense of, she just can't walk anymore. And she'd been normal. And now all of a sudden she couldn't walk anymore for the rest of her life. So she's in a wheelchair. And she comes in, first day of class, kind of wheels herself in. I take one look at her, I realize this girl's absolutely fine. She's fine. So then I got to know her a little bit, and she used to roll up at the end of a lecture, and she'd say, "You made me mad," and then she'd just crack up. Because she knew no one could make her mad but her. No one can make her feel sorry for the fact that she can't walk anymore but her. And she wasn't sorry because I can't walk anymore. Okay, but I can still think. She got a PhD in physics. She teaches physics now from her wheelchair. And you're not going to get any sympathy from her because you have a head cold. That's wrecking your day. All this cold's just tearing me up, man. I could be having fun. I could be thinking about birth, death, air, disease. Actually, if you get sick, you got a chance to think about this stuff. No, it's an opportunity. We have opportunities all day, every day to learn, according to the Buddhas. Every single thing that happens, we can learn something from if we're a learner. So if you want to practice dying, you have to start learning. It ain't in books. So someone asked before the talk tonight, well, where do I learn about how to practice dying? Do we read the Tibetan Book of the Dead or what? And the answer is, where you learn how to practice dying is within yourself. It's called letting go. Let go of thinking you know what someone should be doing, or how they should be thinking, or how they should be feeling, or who they should be, or any of it. Just try letting it be. And then the hardest one of all, try letting yourself be. Just let yourself be who you are. Just let your feelings be what they are, your thoughts be what they are. Just observe it. That's your process right now. You don't have to say good. Get rid of the categories. Good thought, bad thought. Good guy, bad guy. Guilty, not guilty. Just take a step back and observe your process. Like for 5 minutes. You can just do it for 5 minutes. And if you do it for 5 minutes, you get to phase 2. Who's doing the observing? The process isn't observing itself. So then you're getting real. Who's noticing what's in this mind? Who's noticing what's having these feelings? And the answer is the perceiver, the Buddha nature, the Christ nature. You can call it what you want, but quit fighting about it. There's nothing to fight. There's literally nothing to fight about, which is what Gandhi's all about. Nonviolence. Why? Because there's nothing to fight about. But to bring people to see that. When Buddha had his enlightenment experience, he became fully enlightened, which is inconceivable if you try to think about it. One with everything, and yet there's no one there. That's full enlightenment. Manifesting a form out of which people is still helping people 2,500 years later. Nothing we do is going to be helping anyone 5 years after we're dead, let alone 2,500 years later. But anyway, when he became fully enlightened, the same thing happened if you read Matthew in the New Testament to Jesus. Same exact thing happened. Different words. Buddha's fully enlightened, and the bad guy shows up, whose name in Buddhism is Mara, M-A-R-A. You know, in Christian tradition it's Satan or devil, but the bad guy. So Buddha's fully enlightened, and the head of the bad guy shows up, Mara, and says, I know you're fully enlightened, but I think you're making a mistake by trying to share what you know, because no one's going to listen or care. And Buddha thought about it, and he said, some will. Some will. So next time you're, quote unquote, helping somebody, just remember that some will, but a lot won't. So let go. If you think you have some words to say to somebody, go ahead and say them, and then let go. So I'll end on this note. In order to paraphrase from the sound just went off. Oh, to paraphrase from the article, at the moment of death, every being, every human being, experiences for a moment what some people call the white light experience, which has a name, and it's a vesture, which is called the Dharmakaya vesture. It's universal. It's got to do with pure light. It's the highest vesture. It's the pure light. And every human being glimpses that at the moment of death. Every single one. Doesn't matter who they were or what they did. They're going to glimpse it. And the only question is, are they going to be able to take advantage of the glimpse at that time? And if they haven't taken advantage of that glimpse before the body died, they're not going to be able to take advantage of it at that time. It's going to go right by them. And they're going to go into what in effect is a dream state, which will seem quite real. So preparing for the moment of death is to be able to take advantage of what happens when we do it, rather than have it just be a flash that goes by. And we've got to do that while we're alive, or while our bodies are alive. So I'm going to end on this note, and I'm not sure why. But during my many years of psychotherapy, without which I wouldn't be here speaking to you, and I was very fortunate because my karma was such that I was hooked up with some very, very good ones. One woman in particular, who all the other psychiatrists wrote off because they figured she was nuts. Just dressed sloppily, she's fat. You know, we are, you know, if you think you're your body, you think she's hers. And her body wasn't very impressive, and it wasn't dressed like a psychiatrist should be. So none of the other psychiatrists liked her. But she saved my life. And we got to know each other. I mean, we started off seeing each other 6 days a week. And 12 years later, we're seeing each other once every other month. And then it's time for her to move. She's moving away, and she's prepared me for this for a year, because she was my only link to this plane. And, but by the time she was moving, I was, quote, over it, unquote. So we had our last meeting, and she said, Brett, I want to tell you what I've learned in all these years of treating patients. And she only treated extremely severe cases. She didn't deal with neurotic housewives or meandering husbands, you know, serious, psychoses. She said, I'll tell you something I've learned in all my years of working with people. And I said, what's that? And she said, I've learned that people are going to do what they're going to do. Some of my patients got better. Some of them killed themselves. Some of them improved. All I can do is what I can do, but they're going to do what they're going to do. Now, if we don't learn anything else, that's a huge thing to learn about other human beings. You're not in charge. So quit being in charge. And the only way you quit being in charge is to quit being in charge of something you call yourself. That's hard, because then you got to deal with sickness, decay, error, death, birth. Because you got to get over all that to quit being in the driver's seat. Okay, I'm going to steer my life to this, and then if it doesn't happen, you get to freak out because you didn't get your way. So it's best to die every day if you can. Just die every day. My teacher once said to me, like the ancient Greeks, the ancient Hindus divided existence into ages. Like in the Greeks, Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, like that. Well, the Hindus have the same kind of division. And yeah, I don't know where that was going. So anyway, the point is that during, dying every day, it's like my teacher once said to me, and one of the ages in Hindu thought is called a manvantara. And it's just, it's like 32 with, I don't know how many zeros after it. It's unimaginably long period of manifestation. It's just hundreds of millions of years. And he said, Barrett, you have to make every day a new manvantara. You got to start over every morning. Yesterday's a dream. Just let it go. Fresh every morning. New day, new person, new life, new birth. If you can do that, you're making headway. And then die every night. So we'll end on this. Pythagoras taught his pupils, and he didn't take many. But if he took you on as a pupil, one of the things you had to do every night before you went to sleep is go back to the morning and review your whole day. Everything you did, everything you saw, everything you reacted to, everything you thought, everything you felt. And it takes a lot of practice to be able to remember all that, but it's doable. You can make progress. You can remember. If you practice, you'll remember more. Why did he have them do that? They're practicing dying. So if you do it every night, then when you're actually quote unquote dying, it's just like what you've been doing all along anyway. So when your life starts going flashing before your eyes as you die, which it will, and people who had quote near-death experiences always say that. But as my teacher said, at the moment of death, your whole life flashes before your eyes. The unedited version. So if you haven't gained self-knowledge by the time you die, the parts you've edited out, when they come before your eyes as you're dying, you're not going to be able to handle it. You're going to spin out, and that's going to determine your next life. The things you're avoiding. So every night you do this review if you're in Pythagoras' school. Which means everything's okay. So I just wanted to say that my significant other thinks everyone's immortal, and she teaches young children, kindergarten through 6. So she is, when she's talking to a child, she just thinks in terms, I'm talking to an immortal being. Doesn't say it, just does whatever the job is. And these children respond in an incredible way just because they're being seen as an immortal being. Not a little kid with a reading problem. And they love her. The other teachers get jealous because, they run up to her in the hall and want to hug. Why? Because she's treating them like a real being, not like a little kid. So dump the categories and die. Thanks.